Hey, what's up, Corey? How you doing?
Very well, thank you. It's nice to talk to you.
Yeah, likewise, likewise. So, big fan, first time caller, I suppose. But for people who don't know who you are, do you want to give a quick intro?
Sure. I'm a science fiction author, an activist, and a journalist. I've worked for a nonprofit called the Electronic Frontier Foundation, about to start my 25th year there. I've been a blogger for also 25 years. I edited a website called Boing Boing for 20 years, and now I have a newsletter and blog called Pluralistic at pluralistic.net. I've written more than 30 books, many international bestsellers, science fiction for adults, science fiction for kids, young adults, picture books, lots of books about tech policy, including the one that we're talking about today. I hold honorary doctorates in computer science and law. I'm visiting faculty at the University of North Carolina Library School, the MIT Media Lab. I'm a AD White visiting professor at Cornell and a visiting professor of computer science at the Open University. And I also helped start a nonprofit in the United Kingdom called the Open Rights Group that does a lot of the same things the EFF does, but over there. And I'm a Canadian who lives in Los Angeles and London.
Awesome, very cool. Yeah, and you coined a very popular term, which became a very popular book called Enshitification. Um, what is enshitification?
Sure. Well, like I said, I work for this digital rights group called the Electronic Frontier Foundation. I've been doing this for a quarter of a century. And the job of being an activist on digital rights mostly consists of trying to get people to care about stuff that's very abstract and very technical. You can just leave it be, and eventually it won't be abstract and technical because everything will be on fire, and then people will care about it. But ideally, you'd like people to care about it before it gets to that point. And so that's a game of coming up with metaphors and similes and parables and sometimes funny words. And enshitification is a funny word. I came up with it to describe platform decay, and it turns out that the combination of a minor license to vulgarity and I flatter myself, but a pretty good technical, economic, and political analysis of why our platforms are going bad, that combination is a winning combo. So in shitification, it has three parts. There's a descriptive component where I talk about what it looks like when a platform goes bad. There's a theoretical component that hypothesizes a reason that so many of them are going bad now. And there's a prescriptive component that says what we should do about the fact that so many of them have gone bad. And so the descriptive component, I'll run down now. It's pretty straightforward. You have platforms that in stage one are good to their end users, but they find a way to lock those users in. And once they're locked in, you get stage two. The platform knows those locked in users can't readily leave, so it turns the screws on them. It makes things worse for them in order to make things better for business customers who they also lock in, which ushers in stage three, which is making things worse for business customers in order to harvest all the value for shareholders and investors. So everyone is having all the value extracted from them, but we're all locked in and we can't leave. And that's enshitification, a tragedy in three acts. We've seen it in every platform that we rely on. It is spreading, and I think a lot of people are quite angry about it.
Yeah, I think myself included. When did you first notice enshitification? Because it doesn't feel like this is a new phenomenon. The Dark Ages as well, and it felt like even back in the day you had like the digital superhighway and so forth, which are
Information
information
super, yeah,
superhighway,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, which is kind of an early version of that.
Well, look, we didn't invent greed in the middle of the last decade. We have had platforms that have gone bad for as long as I've been using technology. There have been
Yeah.
lots of platforms that have broken my heart by being bad. The difference is that the lock-in has become so powerful. The
Mm.
forces that punish platforms if they are bad have become so weak that instead of doing what Prodigy did, which is just die, these platforms become zombies and they shamble along long after someone should have double tapped them and stuffed them in a shallow grave. And we're kind of trapped in their rotting carcasses. And I think that has been that you can see the forces that stop them from going bad or punish them for being bad. You can see how they were whittled away at different times. You know, for a long time, firms were mostly disciplined by competition or regulation. 40 years ago, a group of radical economists associated with Ronald Reagan, the so called Chicago economists, promulgated an ideology that has since become the dominant one, that monopolies are good and that we should tolerate them, not enforce antitrust law, And so we've just seen increasing monopolization across every sector. When I was a kid, we had 30 professional wrestling leagues. Now we have one, right? But also, like, when I was a kid, there were 30 publishers in New York, and now there's five. One company makes all the hospital beds. They also make all the coffins.
Interesting.
Great combo. One company makes all the vitamin C. One company makes all the glass bottles. Three companies make all the sneakers, right? Like, every sector looks like this. So inbred, they have Habsburg jaws. And when you get rid of competition, you lose regulation as well. Because to effectively regulate, the regulator has to be able to give orders to the competitors, right? If they're more powerful than the regulator, if the ref doesn't have to listen, or if the players don't have to listen to the ref's calls don't matter. The rule book doesn't matter. They just get to cheat. And we have seen the collapse of sort of regulatory credibility again, like by inches, but over decades, where there's a good reason people don't trust their regulators, because they're really not trustworthy. They often side with industry. Like, look, I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I've been vaccinated so many times. I get 5G in a coal mine and I glow in the dark. But if someone tells me I don't trust vaccines because pharma companies will kill you for a nickel and the FDA will help them do it, and the reason they believe that is that the Sacklers who own Purdue Pharma and made OxyContin got to kill 1 million Americans and keep $10 billion. I'm not going to tell you like you're wrong to think that. I still think you should get vaccinated, for the record, right? But I don't think that that's like an irrational belief. So we've seen the collapse of our regulators as well. Tech used to also have other sources of discipline. So it had worker power. The engineers like you were really powerful. The engineers at Google were making about $2 million each for the company. They're really hard to replace. And so, for a long time, if you cared about your users and your boss ordered you to do something Enshitiifying to a product you shipped, you could say, I didn't miss my mother's funeral to ship this product on time just to turn it into shit for you so you can make an extra couple of bucks and hit a KPI. There's a guy across the street who'll give me a job by lunchtime. You're not going to be able to hire anyone to replace me. But because tech workers, they thought that they weren't even workers. They thought they were temporarily embarrassed founders. They didn't want to be in a union. And so the power that they got from scarcity was never consolidated through solidarity. And so once the scarcity went away, once supply met demand, 500,000 tech layoffs in the last 3 years, that tech worker power went away. You tell your boss, I won't do it. He'll say, fine, there's 10 people who will, you're fired. Don't forget to turn in your RFID badge on the way out. Those are expensive, right? And worth something, unlike you. And then we had one other force, a really important one, a technical one, interoperability. The fact that all computers can run every program, that formally every computer is a Turing complete universal von Neumann machine capable of computing all valid programs, means that anytime someone puts a 10-foot pile of shit in a program that you rely on, like the thing that stops you from putting generic ink in your printer, someone can write another program, an 11-foot ladder that just goes over the 10-foot pile of shit, a program that lets you use anyone's printer ink. But over the last 25 years, we've seen the growth of IP law, particularly something called anti-circumvention law, but a whole kind of cluster of laws that collectively felonize modifying things that belong to you if the manufacturer doesn't want you to. And as a result, we've created a kind of felony contempt of business model where if the manufacturer decides to put a defect in their products, either when you buy it or through an over-the-air software update, you can't remove that defect, and no one can go into business providing you with the tool to remove that defect. So you take away all the things that used to punish companies, and you see this slow decline, but it's inexorable and it's unmissable. And where you see companies that were a little better, it's usually because one of these forces were still acting on it. Their workers were still important, or they were worried about interoperability, or maybe there was still a regulator willing to take up the cause, or they hadn't yet merged with their major competitor. But, here we are today. That's just not the case for most platforms.
Absolutely. And as we're recording this, I think it was this week or last week that the administration had it was an executive order that basically said no states could have their own AI law or something. So
that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So much for the laboratories of democracy.
Yeah, no shit. It's yeah, we can get into AI in a bit, but it feels like there's almost an Enshitification of like the social order that's going on as well. So it's
I think they have a common root. Like I would say Well, let me say first of all, go ahead and use enshitification loosely. I don't care. Like that's fine. There's a sort of army of weirdos who follow me around on the internet, scolding people who use the word enshitification in a kind of colloquial way and say, no, you must use it in the way Cory Doctorow has specified. Look, my first two languages were English and Yiddish. Neither of them have a language academy. There's no formally correct version of them. They steal words from other languages. The grammar gets mixed up, and they're glorious languages to speak. As a writer, I don't want to speak a formally correct language.
Yeah.
That's what software is for. Oh, in English, we have words like cleave that mean their own opposite. So cleave means to join together and to cut apart. We have phrases like begging the question that means the opposite of begging the question and the non-opposite of begging the question. It's fine to have ambiguity in our language. We don't have ambiguity in our software instructions, but it's fine to have ambiguity in our language. Source of rich communicative intent. That said, in the formal sense, enshitification is specific to digital technology because it involves some contingencies, right? It involves the interoperability that comes from digital tools, from digital computers, and it involves the contingent nature of the tech workforce for 2 decades, where it was often a force against corruption within firms. And I don't think there are exact parallels for these in government, but I do think that the extent to which the state has decayed is related to the underlying force that has caused the decay of platforms, which is concentration in the hands of a few people who get to decide how our society works. And even if these people were very wise, the fact that they operate with impunity without any checks and balances would be dangerous.
Sure.
And they're not wise. They're often fools. They excel not at making good decisions, but at being ruthless and selfish and crooked. And they make their money that way. And so those are the people ultimately calling the shots.
Sure. And what I was referring to is that at the beginning of your book, too, you kind of go through this epidemiology, the 3-step process of things that were good for users, good to business customers, and it becomes a giant pile of shit. Stage 3, basically. And so that's sort of the mental framework I was evaluating, at least the steps you're going through, because it felt like regulations, you mentioned 40 years ago, it felt very much more pro-consumer, society, and now that part, at least barring the fact that it doesn't have the interrupt part, it feels like it followed the same stages.
Indeed.
Where there has been massive regulatory capture, and you've written about this in other books as well, right?
Yeah, indeed.
The internet con and so forth.
Yep. Yeah, well, look, you can't make a good regulation unless you have adverse parties who show up and poke holes in each other's arguments, right? If we're saying like, okay, what is the correct alloy and material characteristics of a joist to hold up the roof over my head, right? People are going to show up with lots of different answers to that. And some of them will just be wrong because they did the math wrong. Some of them will be wrong in like a parochial way where it's like, well, we think you should use our proprietary alloy or our proprietary design or so whatever. Some will be right. Some will be right, but overbuilt, and that would increase the cost of housing. And so they're still wrong, right? And what you rely on is to have a kind of dialectic, an argument, where all of the different merits and demerits of the different proposals are aired by people who are experts and then evaluated by a different group of neutral experts who work for the government, right? The referees. And when there's like 3 companies in a sector, they all just show up and say, no, the roof should be made of papier mâché, but it should cost as much as gold. And you should make everyone buy it from us. And then the regulator tends to be someone who used to work at one of those like 3 companies, because once the sector has only got 3 companies in it, the only people who understand how it works are people who are in the C-suites of one of those companies. And so they tend to rotate in and out of government service. And so you can see why you just get bad rules. I mean, it's not inconceivable to have good rules. Like the way that we get safe drinking water is not because Congress is full of people who understand water hygiene, right? The way we get good drinking water is by having a good rulemaking process. And the way we get unsafe drinking water, like on indigenous reservations or in Flint, Michigan, is when that rulemaking process becomes corrupted. And it's not corrupted because it got hit by a meteor or bitten by an infectious mosquito, right? It's corrupted because a small number of firms and individuals became powerful enough to corrupt the system.
Speaking of which, so there's a lot of activity right now with AI, both in the development of it and also a lot of lobbying around it. I guess kind of a general question: what's your take on uh, AI right now?
Well, it's a complicated subject. I have a book about AI, being a good AI critic, coming out in
Mm.
June, called The Reverse
Oh,
Centaur's Guide to Life After AI. That I just got the copy edits for. They're due Christmas week, which is
okay.
great. But they're thankfully very light, and I'm working with a great copy editor, so that's good. I think the first thing we should say about AI is it's not real. These firms have spent 600 to 700 billion dollars in capital expenditures, data centers, GPUs, training. And they are making, by their own account, $60 billion a year across the whole sector worldwide. That's a grossly inflated number. To take just one line item out of it, it includes $10 billion every year that Microsoft gives to OpenAI and OpenAI gives back to Microsoft. Right? That's not revenue. Right? If you're walking down the street and a teenager in a green apron gives you a voucher for a $7 latte at Starbucks, and then you go and cash it in and get a latte, Starbucks hasn't made $7. Right? Starbucks has lost the cost of making that latte. To call this an accounting trick is to do violence to the noble accounting trick. Right? It's accounting fraud. Right? So you got this sector that's making at most $50 billion a year, and they've got to make back $600 to $700 billion. So sorry, so $50 billion a year. They've got to make back $600 to $700 billion before they'll be in profit. And they've got to keep asking suckers for money until they get to that point, right? Otherwise, they'll go bust because they've got to pay back all those expenses. And so, how long do they have at $50 billion a year to make $700 billion? Well, they depreciate the GPUs at a 5-year schedule, but they actually depreciate over 2 years, right? That's about how long before they burn out or go obsolete. So again, this is like technically that's just accounting fraud to have a false depreciation schedule. But even if you take it at their word and you call it 5 years, you cannot make $700 billion at $50 billion a year over 5 years. And then you got to replace all the GPUs. And by the way, they've committed to $2 trillion in capex over and above that. You have 7 companies, the so-called Magnificent Seven. They're about a third of the U.S. stock market, the S&P 500, and they're all just passing around the same $100 billion IOU and pretending it's in all of their bank accounts at once. So eventually, they're going to run into suckers, and the bubble is going to pop. And it's not even clear to me that after it pops, whether it will be economical to keep any of the foundation models running at all, right?
Interesting.
So, maybe as a research project or whatever, but if you have to charge $1,000 a seat a month to keep it running, right? And then 90% of the people are currently paying you $20 a month. They're like, well, that's too rich for my blood. Now you have to charge, $20,000 a month a seat to make up for all those people who've walked away from the deal. Then you just don't have a business. You just don't have a business. Like, I could make $50 billion a year if you gave me $700 billion a year, and it'd be much more straightforward. I just keep 650 billion of it and give you back 50, right? And we could call it a day. I could make $60 billion a year that way. I could make $350 billion a year that way if you gave me $700 billion a year. I just give you half of it back. Be straightforward. Don't ask me to make more than $350 billion. I'm keeping half, right? Let's just be clear here. So I think it's worth asking, like, why has the market committed so much capital to a thing that's not real? And there's another way in which AI is not real, which is that AI can't do your job. Um, if AI wasn't the subject of a giant bubble, we would call AI tools plugins. So, I've got a plugin for my IDE that will sketch out like a wireframe of a code routine that I then have to write. It's not software engineering, right? Obviously the AI doesn't have a context window. It's like a baby that loses a game of peekaboo, right? Like, it can't remember what came before, can't think about what's coming afterwards, and it doesn't know what's on either side of it. That's what software engineering is, right? It's thinking about the systems before and the systems after and the systems adjacent to the system you're building, right? Coding is not software engineering. Coding is a part of software engineering. And so, yeah, if you're a software engineer and you got a thing that automatically writes some code, great, right? I mean, a compiler automatically writes code, right? You give it high level language, it gives you assembler. It's automatically writing code. We have tools that write code. They're very important. We wouldn't have computer science without them. And if your compiler got a new plugin that could wireframe a routine for you based on natural language input, we go, what a cool plugin this is. And then that would be it, right? As a writer, if I had a thing that could make a summary of the stuff that I'd written for me, it wasn't very reliable, but it was kind of interesting. I mean, there have been summarizers forever, right? They weren't great. This is better. Still not perfect. It requires that you do, I think, practically speaking, if you want a good summary, as much work as it would take you to make the summary. And if you make the summary yourself, you will actually remember what the summary means, which is why you take notes in a class, right? Not just to refer to later, but as a mnemonic exercise. But, we call it a plugin. We go, oh, it's a useful plugin, right? So why is this product that is not capable of doing your job? Why are so many bosses like being conned by AI salesmen into buying the product, firing their workers, and replacing them with a chatbot that can't do their jobs? And I think the answer is that bosses really hate workers. I know that sounds like a cliche, but if you think about yourself, you're a boss, right? And you're like, I sit here in the C-suite all day, and if I didn't show up for work tomorrow, everything would be fine. But if all my workers didn't show up for work tomorrow, we'd have to shut the business down, right? And the people who do this, they do things that I don't know how to do. And oftentimes the ones that are like really skilled and important to the business, when I try to tell them how to do their job, they either like, depending on the trade, on the sector, they either like politely nod or they just tell me to fuck off and they call me an idiot. Right. When I was on the picket line with the writers, because I live in Burbank, I'm near the Warner Studio and the Disney and Universal. I'm not a member of the Writers Guild, but I'm a member of an affiliated guild, the Animators Guild and the Writers Union. So I would go out and walk the picket line. And I was on the picket line. Another writer said to me, you give a prompt to a chatbot the way you give shitty notes to a writer's room, right? Make me ET, but make it about a dog and give it a love interest and a car chase and big finish, right? And the thing is, you say that in the writer's room and they go, fuck off, you fucking suit. Go back to your office and do some bureaucracy. Adults are here writing a movie, right? But you say it to a chatbot and it will just shit out the script. And I think that there's a certain kind of person who would sacrifice a shootable script that you could make money with for the prospect of never being called a fucking idiot by a writer again. And if you think about coding shops, right? Programmers notoriously pretty bullshit, right? You say to them, hey, I'd like to do this. And they're like, well, not only is that a stupid idea, but in fact, the whole business strategy is stupid. I've made a lot of notes on it. It makes reference to everything you've ever said and done, which I also took notes on. If you've got about 2 hours, I'd like to explain to you why you're fucking stupid, right? And like anyone who's ever been a boss for programmers knows that this is like the way that the shop goes. So you programmers, studio bosses, they dream of a world without people in it, right? Like a script without a screenwriter, a movie without an actor, a coding shop without coders. And, specifically if you're a very powerful boss, right? If you're a billionaire, you have to somewhere in your heart not even really believe that other people exist, right? This is why Elon Musk calls everyone who disagrees with him an NPC, right? He doesn't, because if you're going to make billions of dollars, you have to do that by hurting thousands, if not millions of people. And so you have to think that their pain doesn't matter, that in some important sense, they're just not real people. And if that's the sort of solipsistic sort of K-hole trap that you've got yourself into, like the most important ketamine that Elon Musk does isn't the stuff that goes up his nose, it's the stuff that's on his balance sheet, right? Like being a billionaire is like taking a lot of ket and just not thinking the rest of the world exists, right? And so if you are a billionaire, you don't think the rest of the world exists, you dream of a world without other people in it. Mark Zuckerberg is told the average person wants 15 friends, but they only have 3. And his answer is, we'll give them 12 chatbots. And we laugh at him because we're like, oh, you don't understand what a friend is for because you've got terminal billionaireism. But the thing that Mark Zuckerberg is identifying is that if you own a social media network, sociability is a bug, not a feature. Because sociability in its raw form does not produce the steady stream of clicks and engagement that generate revenue through advertising. And so, the fact that the people on your social media platform want to socialize is a problem to solve. And so Mark Zuckerberg is effectively saying the future of social media is a social media network with no people on it, right? Like you and slop, right? That's the best social media network because the slop never resigns from the system because it's angry at something he did, and then you leave because you love them more than you hate, you hate him more than you love them, right? And you go with them, right? And so all of these people, they if they're like a CEO, if they're in charge, they know that like they're driving, or that they're supposedly driving, but that they're actually sitting in the back seat with like a Fisher Price steering wheel. And what AI is for them is it's a way to wire the Fisher Price steering wheel into the drivetrain of the car, right? You get rid of all the people who you have to rely on to have the business, and you replace them with a pliant chatbot that tells you every idea you have is great and that does everything you tell it to do. And if it does it badly, maybe that's less important than the fact that you finally get to solve the problem that other people don't just do everything you tell them to do. And I think that's like psychoanalytically what AI represents, right? That's not like the thing AI is for or the only thing you can do with AI, but it is the reason that the market has committed $700 billion to AI, is because these guys just really don't believe other people exist and hate the fact that they rely on.
Yeah, it's well, a good example of that. I have a friend who runs a small business. Um, he won't mind me saying he's a bit intolerable to be around. He's using AI to automate a lot of processes, either to write the code for various processes or whatever. And I thought, for you, that's actually a great thing, because
Because now no one has to be your you don't no one has to be your contractor and
yeah,
have you as a
it's
client.
yeah. So, but it's what do you think about this argument that we have to plow this money in because we have to get to AGI?
Well, I think the idea that if you just like keep shoveling words into the word guessing machine, it'll wake up and become intelligent, and maybe if we're unlucky, turn us into paper clips. It's a profoundly stupid one, right? It's like the idea that if we keep breeding our horses to run faster, eventually one of them will give birth to a locomotive. I just don't think a person is a word guessing program who knows more words. I just don't think that's what a person is. I'm not going to rule out the possibility that someday a machine will be conscious. I think it's possible. I'm not a metaphysicist, right? I think that consciousness is a physical process that takes place in our brains, and I don't know enough about quantum mechanics to speculate about whether some of this is taking place subatomically and has some like extremely contingent things where you just put the cells together and it doesn't work and something else is happening. But whatever is happening, I'm confident that someday science will figure it out, and that maybe at some point after that we'll decide to replicate it using machines. I just don't think we replicate it with deep learning. I don't think we replicate it with statistical inference. I don't think that's what a brain is.
Yeah, if it definitely feels like an interesting narrative in the sense where if you're Sam Altman or if you're Dario, right, from Anthropic now, you can say, well, if only you give us more money, trust me, bro, with AGI, I just need like another trillion
Just one more data
dollars.
center, bro. Just one more. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I had this conversation with somebody who was working on Stargate. Actually, it was interesting because it's around January of last year when the $500 billion announcement was made. And he's like, "Yeah, we're going to open data centers. It's great. We're going to dust off old nuclear plants. It's going to be awesome. We're going to get tens of gigawatts of power." And I turned to my friend who's actually a machine learning researcher, and I asked her, "Isn't it weird that the human brain only needs like what 20, 30 watts of power, not gigawatts? And if we could invest that even a sliver of that 500 billion into better math
Or
to
just like
make a better model,
glucose, right?
right? Fair enough.
Right.
Yeah,
So yeah, I hear what you're saying. Also, I hasten to point out that the $500 billion for Stargate was an announcement, not a commitment. And there
right.
isn't $500 billion. There isn't $500 billion committed for Stargate. There isn't anything
This is
like
true.
500 billion. There's a bunch of like contingent, like if you can build this much power, then we will do this data center. But we don't know where we'll get the money from. Kind of commitments that like I mean these people are notorious liars. They have lied about what they're going to do and when they're going to do it for a long time, repeatedly. And like again, if you are smart enough to not lose a game of peekaboo, you should be able to have the object permanence to remember that these guys lied to you last time and not give them the benefit of the doubt this time. I'm not saying that they only ever lie, but if they lie very outlandishly over and over again about the same things over and over again, then just assuming prima facie that they're not lying this time is I think it's a cell phone.
Yeah, I think it's around the time that Doge was kind of got rip roaring through the
Yeah.
government as well. So I don't know if these things are related,
Another
but
another lie, right? Doge
yeah,
lied about the cuts it made. It lied about the efficiencies it realized. It lied about the criteria on which they made those cuts. It lied about everything. Doge is a lie. And I would like to see the $2 trillion that Elon Musk said he was going to cut out of the federal budget. Again, uh, it's like, as George Bush said, "Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, we don't get fooled again."
Yeah. You mentioned this term a bit ago, reverse centaur.
Yeah,
Can you explain what that is?
yeah. So in automation theory, a centaur is a human that is assisted by a machine. So, like, you're using a spell checker, you're using a compiler, you're riding a bicycle, you're using a power blender or a massage gun or an electric toothbrush or I don't induction top, right? You're a human assisted by a machine to do a thing better than a human can do under your own control on your own terms. A reverse centaur is a human who is conscripted to help a machine on its terms. And you can think of this as being like an Amazon delivery driver, right? They've got 9 apps on their phone. They've got 20 sensors in the van. They are having their pay docked if they don't make quota. They're being told where to drive. They're penalized if they make a sudden maneuver. There was recently a report I read. It was ethnographies of drivers who drove for Amazon DSPs, delivery service platforms. One of whom described how the app fired him because when an 18-wheeler lost control and swerved into oncoming traffic, he swerved to avoid it, and they said it was a dangerous maneuver and
What the
fired him.
fuck?
Yeah. You're not given a pee break. You have to pee in a bottle, but you're not allowed to have any bottles full of pee when you get back to the depot. The roads on the way to Amazon depots are filled with bottles of pee that have been hucked out the window by drivers because they get an inspection when they come back, but they're not given a pee break. Again, like, Jeff Bezos doesn't think people are real, right? Like, he wants a van that doesn't need a pee break. And the fact that, like, he might use self-driving software that, like, kills people to do that is worth it if he never has to give consideration to someone's kidneys. For a guy with a penis-shaped rocket, he hates kidneys, right? Reverse centaur, that's the thing that AI is shooting for, right? It's not like, so take radiology, right? I have an extremely treatable form of cancer, but I've been spending a lot of time with radiologists in the last couple of years, and there's a lot of AI applications that are claimed to be good at radiology. I'm not capable of assessing those claims, but let's assume they're true. Let's assume that there's a chatbot that can identify solid mass tumors on chest X-rays that sometimes human radiologists miss. If down at my Kaiser hospital right now, there was an AI salesman talking to the head of the hospital and saying, "Look, here's the plan. Give me $10 million. We'll give you the software. Right now, your radiologists are examining 100 X-rays a day. They're going to get an instant second opinion from the AI. And maybe a couple of times a day, it's going to ask them to go and look again. And so they'll only do 98 a day. So you'll spend $10 million and you'll do 98 instead of 100 chest X-rays a day, but you'll catch all the tumors." I would be like, that is a great investment. Please give that guy $10 million. But the actual sales pitch right now at the Kaiser Hospital, if there's an AI salesman in the hospital head's office right now, is fire half your radiologists.
Mm.
Buy a chatbot for $10 million. Split the difference between their salaries and $10 million with me, right? And we will take the remainder and have them review the chest X-rays that the chatbot has pronounced a diagnosis on at a rate that is too fast for any human being to ever do a proper assessment on. But it'll be their signature at the bottom of the chest X-ray. And if someone dies of cancer because it missed their tumor, it's going to be the radiologist's fault, not yours or mine, right? So the radiologist is a reverse centaur. They're not just being used by the machine, they're being used up by the machine. They're what Dan Davies calls a moral crumple zone, or sorry, an accountability sink. Sorry, the moral crumple zone is someone else's term. I just blanked her name. My apologies if you're listening. But it's to be a moral crumple zone, an accountability sink to absorb the blame so that the hospital can reap the profits. And the reason that's important is because there's a class alliance between cancer patients and radiologists in this fight over AI. If the story was, we can fire radiologists and replace them with chatbots that are better than radiologists, and we are going to make chest X-ray analysis too cheap to meter, and no one will ever have a tumor that is ever missed, I think that people who are worried that they have cancer would say, well, I feel bad for the radiologists. But the point of radiology is not to provide employment to radiologists, it's to prevent cancer. And if we can just fire all the radiologists, let's retrain them or give them a UBI. But we don't need radiologists anymore, right? But if what's actually going on is you're going to go for a chest X-ray and a defective chatbot will pronounce judgment on it, and when you die of cancer, they'll blame one of the remaining radiologists, then you are on the same side as the radiologists, that your interests and theirs converge. Bosses would really like us to think that our interests are opposed to their workers' interests, but they're not.
Interesting. So as an engineer, I'm seeing some parallels here with AI generated code, right? So you got Claude code, which can just rip out who knows how many lines of code, and build seemingly whatever you want. You probably won't know how it's built, but that's a different story. What are your thoughts for sort of the future of software engineers and people who write code? Because I feel like there's some parallels where some software engineers I know are very readily adopting coding tools. They love them. Other times their employers are saying, look, you're going to have to start moving faster, write more code. I saw a CTO on LinkedIn the other day say that no, we have 1,000 times more lines of code now than we used to, which I thought was a very weird flex.
Yeah, it's like
Yeah,
you built the world's heaviest airplane.
yeah, or
Yeah.
it's like using Synthol or something. It's like, okay, cool. But like, what are your thoughts on? Because I feel like code, writing code is sort of the front line of where I think a lot of other work is going to be heading in the future.
So look, if you're a Centaur, right? If you're saying, well, I need this routine written, I've got a unit test that'll tell me right away whether it's any good, or like, say you got like you're doing uh, a port from an old system to a new one. You've got like a single data file that's like a config file that needs to be rewritten in a new format. And you can tell pretty quick whether or not it's a good config file or a bad config file. You could write software to do this single job, right? But that's dumb. You could just ask the machine to do it. That's fine, and you'll know right away whether it's done. And so you, as the developer, you're in charge of when you use it and when you don't, and you get to make judgments from moment to moment. And as you say, you get it to write the code, but you don't necessarily know how it was built. Well, the problem is that for maintainability, you not only have to know how it was built, you have to be able to convey how it was built to other people, and you have to make it legible. One of the things that you get when you write code for a long time is what's sometimes called process knowledge. The Germans call it Fingerspitzengefühl, which means the fingertip feeling. It's like you're holding a ball on your fingers and you can tell whether it's in balance or about to tip this way or that way. So that kind of feeling is a thing that you only get with experience, and because you spent hours or days trying to debug some big gnarly bug, that when you write a routine this way, when you link systems in this way, it's very hard to figure out how they're going wrong. And if you link them in a slightly different way, or if you construct the system in a different way, it might take a little longer, but it's not going to accumulate that tech debt of not knowing when things have gone wrong. And so you could review all the code the AI writes to make sure that it complies with this. This is a very boring job. It's the least fun part of programming, right? Is doing code review on other people's code. You wouldn't be solving any of the gnarly problems. And if your boss is saying, well, we expect you to write 3 orders of magnitude more code than ever, then you're not going to be reviewing the code. You're just going to be signing your name to the code and taking the blame when it goes wrong. And so, to understand the mystery of like why some coders say I love AI and other coders say I hate AI. I mean, some of them might just be bad coders, right? But like we're good coders, people you respect are like AI is making my life great versus AI is making my life terrible. You have to understand like who's in charge of how they use the AI and when. As a science fiction writer, people sometimes think that my job is to like imagine the future, right? Or think of a new gadget. And I don't think that's what science fiction writers do. Well, for one thing, we don't know what the future is. If we knew what the future was, there'd be no reason to get out of bed because it wouldn't change based on what people do. So no one knows what the future is. But also, you know, imagining the gadget is a lot less interesting than interrogating what the gadget does and who it does it for and who it does it to, right? The social arrangements of the gadget, right? Claude Code or any other AI assistant, if it's a thing that you get to choose to use, well, you might choose unwisely, but at least you're making the choice. And if you regret it, right, if you learn something new about when you shouldn't use it, no one can force you to use it, right? You have the final say. And, there are some bosses who are saying, oh, no, we're not forcing our programmers to use AI. We are merely giving them so much work that they couldn't possibly do it unless they used AI, which is, again, not much of a ruse. Like, again, I know the standard, can you win at peekaboo may sound like a weird standard, but like babies stop enjoying peekaboo when they acquire something called object permanence, which is the
Mm.
ability to remember what just happened. And if you can't remember what just happened, if you don't have object permanence, then you're in trouble, right? And I think that AI bots don't have object permanence. They don't have context windows. Context windows are geometrically, computationally expensive to create for um, uh, machine learning systems. Uh, but also that we are asked as AI users, when we are given these ridiculous promises by AI boosters, to willingly set aside our object permanence, to become not even toddlers, but very small babies.
Kind of closing out and switching gears a bit. You write a lot. I'm an author as well. I'm not nearly as prolific as you are, but like, what is your process of ideating a book or an article and pursuing those threads?
Well, I just asked a chatbot.
Okay, just writes it
No,
all for you.
I do not use a chatbot. Um, so I have been a blogger for 25 years now. My 25th anniversary of my first blog post is, I think, January the 13th of next
Oh,
month.
congrats.
So other writers, they have little notebooks that are full of notes they scribble to themselves about thoughts they've had. I don't have a little notebook full of thoughts. Whenever anything seems important to me in any way, I write a blog post about it. And there's a lot of advantages to that. Not just that I can't read my handwriting, but also that um, when I write for a public audience, I apply rigor necessarily that I wouldn't apply to notes to myself. I assume I'll remember later what I meant, and I don't. And so that creates a kind of mnemonic soup of fragmentary ideas that seem important, that I've fixed in my mind by the act of thinking them through and writing them out, which means that periodically in this supersaturated solution, some of these little particles will glom together and nucleate, and a crystallization process occurs that gives me like a speech or a novel or a nonfiction book or a big long synthetic blog post that's more like an essay or a paper. And so all of this stuff, it's in a WordPress database. I can pull it back out again. I do that systematically. So every morning in my newsletter, I go through my old headlines from 20 years ago, 15 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, and 1 year ago on this day. And starting next month, 25 years ago as well. And I pull out all the headlines that seem important. And I put them in the newsletter in a section called Object Permanence. And it refreshes me. It makes me remember what used to be important to me, what I used to think about things, what things caught my eye. It's like if you're working dough and it's getting crumbly at the edges and you fold it back into the middle, right? All the stuff that's at the edge of your regard is coming back into the center of your focus. And it's an extraordinarily fecund process. It produces a lot of value. It produces value from the minute you start doing it, and the value only goes up the more that you do it. And so I still write a blog post almost every day. I used to write 15 to 20, but they were much shorter. Now I write one long essay every day. Um, and even on, I nominally posted my last one until the break yesterday, until after the break yesterday. And I started work on a big speech I'm going to give at the Chaos Communications Congress in Hamburg in a couple of weeks, or next week, 10 days, something like that. But I also started writing a blog post this morning to publish afterwards because I just can't stop it. Because every thought I have, I'm like, I have to capture this. I have to write a blog post about it. So that's my process. It's like the blogging process. I call it the MemEx method.
Mm.
Vannevar Bush and As We May Think, and I think it was 45, talked about having a memory expander, a thing that captured all the stuff you'd read, all the ideas you'd had, and helped you push them down the stack and then pop the stack at the right moment. That's what a blog is for me.
Interesting. How long are you writing every day?
Depends on what you mean by writing.
Yeah.
I don't think I could write unless I was reading. I don't think like how
Mm,
many, how long are my fingers on the keyboard typing 70 words a minute? Not that long, right? Because
yeah.
70 words a minute, 1,000 words is not much, right? 15 minutes, but like I am thinking about it. I'm looking up references.
Yeah.
I'm making notes to myself, whatever. And so I'm either doing it all day long or barely at all, depending on how you think.
Yeah. Do you consider reading to be part of the writing?
Sure. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And
Same.
I read all
Yeah.
the time, and there's a bunch of podcasts I really like that I find very informative. But I also I swim every day. I have a bad back, and we bought a house across the street from a public pool in Burbank, and I have an underwater MP3 player, and I get through a couple of audiobooks a month that way. It's great. You buy them from the DRM free stores like Libro.fm, and you can just put them on
Yeah.
any MP3 player.
That's super cool.
Yeah.
What can we look forward to next year? You say you have one book coming out. Is there
So
anything
there's
else?
this book called The Reverse Centaur's Guide to Life After AI. There's a graphic novel of Enshitification. I'm not sure yet when that'll be out. That Corin Shodme is adapting with my help. There is a another book I'm writing now called The Post-American Internet, about what kind of internet we can build now that Trump has basically blown up the case for anyone in the world giving a shit what America thinks your internet should do. Because you don't have to worry about tariffs anymore because you've got them, and you don't have to worry about selling things to America anyway, because the K-shaped recovery means that 90% of America has no income, and they've run out of things that they can borrow against in order to keep consumption going on credit. And we've killed SNAP, so the government's not buying things on behalf of people. And we've killed foreign aid, so other countries don't have to worry that America will cut off their foreign aid. Even the military, Congress just dropped out of the appropriations bill, just dropped the requirement that the military bind its contractors to right to repair. So it's going to continue its proud tradition of like not allowing the military to fix their own stuff and like shipping generators back from overseas.
It's fucking
So
insane.
like why worry about America anymore? And like that's not good. I live here. My stuff is here. My retirement savings are denominated in USD. Like it's bad. But on the plus side, everything bad about the internet overseas, except for the stuff that China does, and to a lesser extent the stuff Russia does, is being done because the US has insisted that it be that way. And so now everyone gets to figure out what they want to do, and they kind of have to, because the um, US has started using the tech platforms as weapons in geopolitics. Microsoft cut off the International Criminal Court's Outlook and Office 365 access when they swore out an arrest warrant for Benjamin Netanyahu for genocide. They basically bricked the ICC. And every government ministry, every important corporation, every small business, every household in the world is reliant on US big tech. So the US could just nuke that. This is what we were told China would do if we let them in our telecoms, right? And it's true, like they could. And the way you get around both of those things is you make it legal to jailbreak stuff, and you rip out the US cloud connections and you replace them with freestanding sovereign clouds that run on metal in your own country using open source software you can audit. And it's a global project, right? You don't have to develop it all on your own. Unlike trying to figure out what we're going to do now that US dollars are not a good interchange format, because the SWIFT system has been weaponized, and the Federal Reserve will turn over a country's bank balance to US creditors, which happened to Argentina. So everyone's trying to figure out what to do about that. And it's like a horrible order n squared problem where you have to somehow have like deep Forex markets for every pair of every currency in the world, which is like nuts and impossible. But no one knows what else to do. I mean, Ethiopia has just revalued its debt in renminbi, which like I don't think is going to work very well for them. But
Mm,
unlike that, we've got a really easy problem to solve, at least for some values of easy, in making drop-in replacement software for every platform that is currently tethered to the US cloud, because everyone can work on it together, right? It becomes less like technology and more like science. Like in World War II, there wasn't like Nazi radio and Allied radio. There was just radio, right? It's just physics, right? And it may be that like the code that we use for infra, for like making a car go, making a router go, making a tractor go, making a power plant go, that all that code is just like standard, debugged, open, uh, under free software license, localized by lots of different actors around the world. and auditable and runs on commodity hardware. Not because like that is necessarily the best code in terms of performance, although it might be, but also because it fails most gracefully.
Hmm.
No, it's not connected to a cloud that can be pwned by hackers or have a single bad actor within the state. You remember, one day we all woke up and Grok was calling itself Mecha Hitler
Right.
because they just had like they just let randos inside the Twitter organization change the foundational prompt for their like systemic chatbot. Right, that's a problem everywhere. Right, like Microsoft runs a tighter ship than Elon Musk does, but someone at Microsoft could brick anything. Right, someone at John Deere could brick any tractor in the world, even if the John Deere company is being ordered by Donald Trump to do it, which they might be. Someone at John Deere could do it, either because it's business policy or because no language on earth contains the phrase "as good as the infosec at John Deere."
When's that book come out?
It'll probably be next winter.
Next winter? Okay, awesome. Looking forward to that
Next
one.
winter, we're also going to get the graphic novel of my novella, Unauthorized Bread, so a young adult graphic novel. And then somewhere in there, I'm going to also bring out a collection of Little Brother short stories. I got to write one more story for that.
Oh, I love those.
And what else do I have coming out? I did a little art book this year. I'm going to do another one next year probably. So I've been making these quite elaborate collages out of Creative Commons and public domain materials using the GIMP for my blog. It's the opposite of AI art. And I think I'm getting good at it. I did a little art book this year, limited run of 500, and I might do another one next year.
That you've done, like you're the artist.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Man, absolute machine, Cory.
Ah.
So that's so cool. Well, it's great talking to you.
Hey, it was great talking to you too.
Yeah, likewise. So hopefully see you around. But anyway,
All
good
right.
luck with everything.
Thanks, Joe. Nice
See you.
talking to you.
See you, Cory.
Bye.